guys, thanks for stopping by. Welcome to ASMR. Let's find a quiet spot, get your headphones in, and together we'll dive into a world of whispers and chills. I do long-haul deliveries across the southwest. Not glamorous, but it's steady work, quiet too. Just me, the road, and late-night talk radio. This happened 3 months ago. It was about 2:30 in the morning, pitch black, no moon. I'd taken a detour off I-40 because of construction and was on this narrow, two-lane highway that cut through Navajo land. No lights, no gas stations, no traffic. Just endless desert and scrubland under a sky full of stars. About an hour into the detour, I noticed headlights behind me. Not close, but visible. I figured someone else had taken the same route. No big deal. But after 20 minutes, they were still back there. Same distance, same brightness. I slowed a little to let them pass. Nothing. I sped up. So did they. I pulled off briefly at a dirt turnout, pretending to check my tyres. They pulled off too. Same distance behind me. Didn't get closer, didn't stop. Just stayed on the road, idling there, headlights glowing in the dust. I waited, so did they. Eventually, I got back in and kept driving. They did too. I figured maybe it was a coincidence. Some other driver who didn't want to pass on a dark road. Happens. But then I started to notice something strange. There was never a car shape, just the lights. No hood, no grille, no silhouette in my mirrors. Just two bright white lights, hanging there in the dark like floating eyes. And they were perfectly shaped, not a wobble, not a flicker, almost like they were painted on glass. I turned off the radio, rolled down the window. The night was silent, no engine sounds behind me. I should have heard tyres on pavement, or the hum of another car's motor, but there was nothing. Just those lights. I started getting this weird feeling in my chest, like being watched from behind. The road got more remote. No signs, no intersections, just an endless stretch of blacktop. Then my GPS stopped working. Not disconnected, just frozen. The screen stuck on the same frame. Continue for 23 miles. I tapped it. Nothing. My phone had no signal, no bars, not even emergency service. I glanced up. The lights were still behind me. Closer now, just a little. I took a breath, gripped the wheel, and decided to pull over again, this time fast. I'd wait for them to pass, wave them by, get a good look at the car. I eased onto the shoulder, flicked on my hazards, and watched in the mirror. The lights kept approaching, slow, steady. But then they drifted sideways, off the road. I leaned forward, squinting. They weren't following the curve of the asphalt. They were moving in a straight line, across the desert. Still perfectly aligned, still hovering, like they weren't attached to anything at all. Then they just blinked out, gone, pitch black behind me. I waited, heart pounding, nothing. After about 5 minutes, I got back on the road. I drove the next 10 miles in silence, watching my mirrors, checking every shadow. Eventually, the GPS refreshed. My phone buzzed back to life and signal returned. And then the lights came back, not behind me, in front of me. Far off in the distance, 2 small dots of white on the road. At first, I thought it was another car, but they didn't move. They just stayed there, suspended, waiting. And when I got closer, I realised they weren't headlights. They were eyes. Reflective, round, too high off the ground. whatever they belonged to, was standing in the middle of the road, tall and thin, just barely visible in the glare of my brights. I swerved, skidded onto the shoulder. When I looked back, nothing, just empty desert again. I drove straight through until I hit a truck stop on the other side, parked under the brightest lights I could find, and stayed in the cab until morning. The next day, I called the mechanic to check my truck. Nothing wrong, but I didn't take that detour again. A few weeks later, I mentioned it to a guy at a rest area near Winslow. He was older, local Navajo, judging by his hat and the truck plates. I described the lights, the silence, the thing in the road. He just looked at me and said, "It's not a place for outsiders to pass through at night. Sometimes the land watches back." Then he got in his truck and drove away. I used to take the same room home every night from my job at a 24-hour warehouse. Late shift, mostly quiet roads, nothing unusual. There's this one overpass just outside of town. It's especially creepy during the day, but at night, something about it always made me uneasy. Not because of the road itself, but because of what I started seeing up there. It began around early November. I remember because the clocks had just gone back and it started getting darker earlier. That night, I saw her for the first time. A woman, standing dead centre on the overpass sidewalk, dressed in a long, faded coat. Her posture was strange, completely still, with her back to the traffic. I slowed a little as I drove under her, just instinctively, and I felt it then, that heavy, stomach-dropping feeling you get when something is wrong, but your brain hasn't figured out what yet. I brushed it off at first, told myself it was probably a hitchhiker or someone walking home. But the next night, she was there again, same spot, same coat, same posture. And the night after that, she never moved, she never looked down. I stopped checking after a week and tried to ignore her, but I always felt her, like she was aware of me every time I passed. That same low pressure in my chest would creep in about a mile before I reached the overpass. Then, about 2 weeks in, things escalated. I was heading home around 3 a.m. and the fog was thick that night, one of those blankets that soaks up your headlights. I was already tense as I neared the overpass, expecting her to be there, but this time she wasn't standing on it. She was at the base of the hill, on the shoulder of the road, just outside my driver's side window as I passed. I didn't stop, didn't even turn my head, but I caught enough in my peripheral to know it was her. Same coat, same limp black hair, only this time, her face was visible in the mirror, just for a second. Her eyes were open too wide, way too wide, and I swear they locked with mine through the rear view. My hands went clammy on the wheel. After that, I started leaving work a bit later, hung around the warehouse just to avoid the overpass. But no matter how late I waited, she was always there. Sometimes on top of the overpass, sometimes near the exit ramp. Once, I saw her just standing beside a gas station sign 2 miles from the bridge, just watching. I told myself I was hallucinating, sleep deprivation, but I couldn't deny the consistency. Always the same woman, always silent, and always too still. Then, one night, I saw a patrol car pulled over the shoulder just before the overpass. I slowed down out of habit and rolled my window a little, curious. There were no flashing lights, just a cop car sitting with its high beams on, aimed up at the overpass. No sign of the officer. As I passed, I saw the door was hanging open, and standing at the edge of the bridge, closer than ever before, was the woman. She was leaning forward now, not just standing, but bending, like she was staring directly down at my windshield. Her mouth was open, and her arms, they weren't at her sides anymore. They were reaching out, palms down, hovering inches above the road, as if trying to touch my car. I floored it. That night I didn't go home. I drove straight to my brother's place 2 towns over. I didn't sleep, I couldn't. I told him everything the next morning. He didn't laugh, didn't try to explain it away, just said, "You're not the first one." Turns out, there have been stories about that overpass for years. People seeing a woman late at night, folks crashing under strange circumstances. One guy swore she appeared in his backseat and whispered something in a voice he couldn't understand before he veered off the road. I took the long way to work after that, added 30 minutes to my commute, but I didn't care. I even moved in with my brother temporarily, just to avoid driving past that spot. But here's the thing, that was over a year ago now, and last week I stayed late at a friend's place. Didn't think much of it. I left around 2 a.m, took what I thought was the quickest route back. Habit kicked in, and I ended up at the base of that overpass. The streetlights were out, my phone had no signal, and as I slowed, the passenger side door clicked open, unlocked. I didn't touch anything, I didn't even breathe, but I heard something wet slide across the seat next to me. I refused to look, I just gripped the wheel and drove. I haven't taken my car out at night since, and sometimes, when it's real quiet, I still hear that soft, open-mouthed breathing just behind my shoulder. I moved into this complex after a breakup. Nothing dramatic, just one of those things where you both realise the relationship's been hollow for a while. I found a small, affordable 1-bedroom in a 3-storey building. Not the nicest part of town, but quiet enough. I was in Unit A, bottom floor, far end. The kind of layout where each entrance opens into a shared walkway with only one neighbour beside you. In my case, that neighbour was Unit B. They were quiet, mostly. Family of 3, I think. A man, a woman, and a little girl. I never got their names. We'd nod occasionally, maybe exchange a morning if we left at the same time, but they kept to themselves. The first weird thing happened about a month in. I came home from work one day and found a little paper flower on my doormat. A simple origami thing, delicate, like it had been made by small hands. It had a tiny face drawn on it in pink marker, smiling, with 2 dots for eyes. I assumed the daughter from Unit B had made it, maybe a friendly gesture. I smiled, kept it on the counter for a few days and didn't think much of it. 2 days later, there was another. This time, it was shaped like a bird, with black eyes scribbled into the paper. Again, no note, no explanation. This kept happening for weeks. Every few days, a new origami figure. A swan, a butterfly, even a frog. Each one drawn on, each one left quietly on my doormat sometime during the day. Always small, always handmade. I figured the girl was just bored. Maybe her parents encouraged it as a way to make friends. But then they stopped, abruptly. I came home one evening and found nothing on the mat. No flower, no creature. Same the next day and the next. By the 5th day, I found myself missing the little paper animals. Weird, I know, but I'd grown used to them. They felt like quiet company. Out of curiosity, I decided to knock on their door. I waited a full minute, heard nothing, and left. The next day, I tried again. This time, the door creaked open just a little. enough to see into the darkened unit. I could make out some furniture, a lamp, the edge of a hallway, but no movement, no voices. "Hello," I said gently. "I live next door. Just wanted to say thanks for the origami." No response. I stood there for a second longer, then closed the door. It hadn't been locked. I told the landlord about it the next day, mostly because it felt weird. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Unit B?" I nodded. He hesitated, then said, "There's no family living there right now. It's empty." I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. "No," I told him. "I see them all the time. Man, woman, little girl. They've been living there since I moved in." He looked at me, dead serious. "It's been vacant since January. Pipes burst. Police is still trying out. No one's supposed to be in there." I asked to see for myself. He let me in that afternoon. Same unit, same hallway I'd glimpsed, same lamp in the corner. Only there was no furniture, just mould stains where it had once sat. The walls were bare. The floor still had fans going to pull moisture out. The bedrooms were empty. The kitchen looked like it hadn't been used in months. There was dust on everything. I stood there stunned, trying to piece it together. I knew I'd heard people next door. Footsteps, voices, even a radio one morning. But there was no sign anyone had lived there for weeks, maybe longer. I went home in a daze. I didn't sleep. The next morning, when I opened my door to grab the paper, there was another origami animal on the mat. A dog this time, drawn in dark red ink. The eyes were crossed out. I brought it inside, examined it. There was something tucked inside the folds, a tiny scrap of lined notebook paper. It said, "Please don't forget us." I showed it to the landlord. He was shaken, but insisted no one had been in Unit B. No new keys signed out. No signs of forced entry. We checked again. This time, the origami dog was sitting on the windowsill inside the empty unit. That night, I heard footsteps through the wall, running, child-sized. Then, the soft sound of something dragging. I pressed my ear to the wall. It was faint, but I swear I heard a woman whispering, not in English, just this soft, rhythmic chanting. I moved my mattress into the living room that night and slept with every light on. The next morning, I woke up to find my door wide open. Nothing stolen, nothing disturbed, except for the line of red ink footprints leading from the door to my bedroom and back out again, tiny ones, like a child's. After that, the origami stopped for good, but I'd see the girl sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, in reflections, once in the window of Unit B as I pulled into the lot, just standing there, head tilted slightly, holding something small in her hand. I stopped knocking, stopped looking over, and after a while, it quietened down again. No more notes, no more footsteps. I moved out 2 months ago, left everything except the last origami piece. It was waiting for me the morning I left, a single, crumpled flower with no eyes, no smile, just one word written on the petals, "Stay." I kept it in a drawer. I haven't looked at it in weeks, but sometimes, just after midnight, I still hear the sound of paper folding behind me. I used to work in this huge corporate building downtown, 12 floors above ground, 2 below. Offices, storage, maintenance, nothing fancy. The lobby was massive, all glass and marble. A central staircase ran along one side, but most people used the escalators that went down to the lower levels, B1 and B2. I worked in records and data compliance, so I was down there a lot. I never thought much about it until late last year. That was when I started noticing people using the escalator and not coming wasn't immediate, just small things. A guy in a grey coat would ride down, and 20 minutes later, I'd realise I hadn't seen him again. No door opening, no elevator chiming, no footsteps back up. Then, a woman with bright red shoes. Then, an older man carrying a green folder. I started keeping track, not obsessively, just mentally. I realised it happened more often than not. People would go down the escalator and not come back. One day, I mentioned it to Karen, a co-worker of mine on B1. She laughed at first, but I could tell something registered in her face. I've noticed that too, she admitted. I figured they were going to B2 or the utility stairs. But have you ever seen anyone actually come up those stairs? I asked. She thought about it, then shook her head. That night, I stayed late. I pretended I had a report to finish, but really, I wanted to observe the escalator. I sat at the back of the lobby, far enough not to draw attention. The building was nearly empty by then, just cleaners and a few execs burning the midnight oil. At 8:13 p.m, I watched a man in a navy jacket step onto the down escalator. I waited. 9:10, nothing. 10:03, still nothing. At 10:26, I walked over to the escalator myself and peered down. It was still moving, humming softly in the fluorescent light, but something about it looked off. The bottom didn't look like B1 or B2. I know that sounds crazy, but it felt deeper, like the escalator just kept going. I got on, just for a moment, just to see. I figured I'd step down to B1, loop around, and come back up, confirm it was nothing. Except I never reached B1. The escalator kept moving past where B1 should have been. No signs, no lighting changes, just this tunnel of moving rubber and glass. My ears started popping, like I was descending into a pressurised area. I turned to go back up, but the up escalator wasn't there. It was gone, just a blank wall where it should have been. And then, the lights flickered, just once, but when they came back on, I wasn't alone. There was a woman standing 5 steps behind me, pale, dressed like an office worker, but her clothes were out of date, maybe mid-90s. She was barefoot, hands limp at her sides, eyes unfocused. Her mouth moved, but I didn't hear anything. I turned and ran, kept descending until I saw a landing, jumped off the side of the escalator, slammed into a door labelled service only. It was unlocked. Inside was a maintenance hallway, long, dim, stained concrete. It stretched in both directions. No signs, no sound, just that faint mechanical hum of the escalator somewhere behind me. I walked for what felt like hours. Finally found a stairwell, no floor numbers, just arrows pointing up and down. I went up. 12 flights later, I reached a plain steel door. No handle, no markings. But when I leaned close, I heard whispers. Not words, just whispers, like people trying to remember who they were. I backed away, ran back down, took the lower stairs, found another hallway, then a freight elevator. I hit every button on the panel. Most were blank. One lit up. The doors closed. When they opened, I was in the lobby again. It was 4:12 a.m. and the building was empty. I walked outside and didn't look back. I took a job as a ranch hand last summer out in Clear Creek County, real middle of nowhere territory. Closest town was a 20-minute drive and had more stray dogs than people. I needed the work and liked the solitude, so it suited me fine. The ranch was owned by a man named Ray Fletcher, a quiet guy in his 60s. He lived alone on the property, but hired help to maintain the fences and check the livestock. There were maybe 50 head of cattle across several fields, most separated by long dirt tracks and rusted out gates. My job was simple: ride out every day, check the fencing, and make sure the herd was where it should be. If a section was loose or sagging, I'd fix it. If a gate was open, I'd close it, that kind of thing. The land stretched for miles, golden grass, dry wind, buzzing insects. It was peaceful, except for one gate. It was out past the third pasture, near the edge of the property line. We called it Gate 9, though there were only 7 marked gates on any of Ray's maps. The gate always felt wrong. Nothing dramatic at first, just the feeling when I approached it, like the silence got heavier. The air felt colder there, even in the dead heat of August, and no matter how recently I'd closed it, it'd always be open the next day, always. I told Ray about it once. He was sitting on the porch sipping coffee from an old tin cup. He looked at me for a long second and said, "Then close it again." That was it. The next morning, I rode out and found Gate 9 open again. The chain was undone, but still hooked neatly on the post, like someone had opened it carefully, deliberately. There were no boot prints, no tyre tracks, just the open gate swinging slightly in the wind. I shut it, secured the chain with a padlock I brought myself. Went back the next day. It was wide open. Padlock was gone. Chain was hanging loose. No sign it had been cut or forced. Just gone. I started getting headaches whenever I got close to it. Dull, tight pressure behind my eyes. And I swear the cattle wouldn't go near it. I tried herding them toward that section of pasture once, just to test it. They backed away like I'd shocked them. I stopped trying after that. Then the night visits started. I lived in the bunkhouse, a little wooden cabin set a few hundred yards from the main house. Middle of nowhere, so you hear every sound. Coyotes, owls, wind in the grass. But one night, I woke up to something knocking on the door. Not a person knock, not even fists. It sounded like bones, light, dry tapping, 4 or 5 times, then silence. I didn't open it, just sat in bed, heart pounding, waiting for sunrise. Next morning, I found the hoof prints. Not cow, not deer, something else, smaller but deep, like they carried weight they shouldn't. They circled the cabin, stopped at the front door, then led off toward the field beyond Gate 9. Ray didn't say a word when I told him, just stared off toward the hills and muttered, "It's not the land, it's the thing that wants through it." I asked what he meant. He shook his head and walked off. That night, I dreamt I was standing in the field beyond Gate 9. The sky was wrong, too dark, stars moving in slow spirals. Something was watching me from behind the gate. I couldn't see it, but I felt it in my spine, like a cold wire slowly being pulled tighter. Then I heard the voice. It didn't speak with words. It spoke in pressure, in thought. "You opened it. You looked." I woke up, drenched in sweat. There were dirt streaks across my sheets, as if something had climbed onto the bed, something with long, wet hands. I should have quit, I know that, but I didn't. I was too curious, too stubborn. A week later, I decided to ride out just before dusk. I wanted to see if it would open again, watch it happen. I found a spot on a hill with a clear view of the gate and waited. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched across the grass. Everything was quiet. Then I saw movement, but not near the gate. It was behind me. I turned and saw Ray standing just a few yards off. His face was pale, sweating, his eyes locked on the field. "You need to go, he said. I want to see it, I told him. He didn't argue, just whispered, that's what it wants. Then, without looking at me, he turned and walked back toward the house. I stayed. For an hour, nothing happened. Then, the chain fell. I didn't hear it unlock, didn't see it drop. One moment, the gate was closed. The next, it was slowly swinging open, and something stepped through. It looked almost human, but wrong. Its limbs were too long, knees bending sideways, skin the colour of dry clay, and its face, if you can call it that, was a blank oval, no mouth, no eyes. But it looked at me. I felt it. It took 2 steps forward. I ran, didn't stop until I hit the bunkhouse, locked the door, pulled the bed in front of it. It didn't follow me, but I heard it walking outside, circling, not fast, just enough to let me know it was there. I left the next morning and told Ray I was done. He nodded, handed me a paper bag with my last check and a bottle of water. Before I drove off, he said, if you dream of it, don't look at it. I haven't gone back, but I still dream of that field, the gate, the thing on the other side. And last week, I woke up to a chain uncoiling outside my apartment door. A few years ago, I worked as an overnight cleaner in a corporate office building downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent and the hours suited me. I'm a night person anyway. The building had 12 floors, offices, meeting rooms, a couple of break areas. Everything felt a bit too clean, too beige. The kind of place where every cubicle looks identical and every hallway hums with the same low fluorescent buzz. I worked with a guy named Leo. He handled the upper floors. I took the lower ones. We only really crossed paths at the start and end of our shifts. I liked Leo. Quiet, steady, the kind of person who didn't need to fill silence with small talk. Our job was simple. Vacuum, mop, empty bins, wipe down surfaces, and make sure nothing was out of place. There were a few rooms we were told to avoid, mostly executive offices or server areas. We didn't ask questions. It started about a month into the job. I was cleaning the second floor restrooms when I heard footsteps in the hallway. That's not unusual. Security sometimes did rounds, and occasionally late shift employees would come in. But these footsteps, they were odd, light, barely audible, like someone wasn't wearing shoes. They passed by the restroom door, and I caught a glimpse of someone, just the lower half of their legs, pale, no pants, just bare skin, and a sort of hospital gown hanging low. I stepped out immediately, thinking maybe someone was hurt or lost. No one was there. The hallway was completely empty. The elevators hadn't moved. Emergency stairs were closed. I stood there for a while, mop still in hand, listening. But all I heard was the soft hum of the vending machine at the end of the hall. I told Leo about it at the end of the shift. He didn't laugh, just nodded and said, "Second floor's weird. You have a clean conference room too, see?" I shook my head. That one was off limits, always locked. Leo looked at me for a moment, then said, "Good, don't." That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of those legs, that gown, it stayed with me. I kept thinking about how silently they moved, like they weren't touching the floor. A week later, I was vacuuming the break room on floor 3 when I noticed something out of the window. The building across from us had tinted glass, but sometimes you could catch your own reflection if the light hit right. Except this time, I didn't see myself. I saw a group of people, 6 or 7 of them, standing in a loose circle. Thin, greyish skin, blank, dressed in old hospital scrubs and those same thin gowns. Some had bandages on their faces. One was missing half an arm. They were facing outward, away from each other, like they were watching every corner of the room. I turned around, heart hammering, nothing there. When I looked back at the window, it was just my reflection again. I finished the shift and went home, stomach tight the entire time. That was when the dreams started. They were always the same. I'd be walking through the building, only it was empty, completely silent. All the lights were off. My footsteps would echo. Then I'd start hearing whispers, dozens of voices, all overlapping, all saying the same word, clean, over and over, clean, clean, clean. And then I'd see them, the same group, standing in the corners, under desks, behind chairs, staring at me. One night, I woke up to the sound of something being dragged across the floor. I live alone. I don't even own anything heavy enough to make that sound, but it was real. I started carrying a flashlight at work. I'd walk through each floor before starting, just to feel like I had control. Most nights, everything was normal, but sometimes I'd find things moved. Chairs turned to face the wall, bins stacked on top of each other. Once, an entire row of cubicle monitors had been turned off, even though I'd seen them glowing minutes earlier. I stopped telling Leo. He didn't want to talk about it anymore. Said the more you acknowledge them, the more they'd notice you. One night, maybe 2 months in, I got a call from the supervisor. Said Leo had quit. Didn't leave a note, just turned in his badge and stopped showing up. That meant I had to clean the upper floors for the week. I didn't want to, but I needed the money. So, I went up to the 10th floor around 1 AM, bucket in hand, flashlight clipped to my belt. It was freezing. The air was wrong, like walking into a refrigerator. The lights flickered when I flipped the switch. Halfway down the hallway, I passed a room with its door cracked open. Conference room 10B. I'd cleaned it before, always locked, always pristine, but this time it was open, and inside were chairs arranged in a circle, like a meeting or a group therapy session, and on each chair was a bundle of folded clothes, neatly stacked, gown, pants, shoes. 12 chairs, 12 bundles, no dust, no dirt, like someone had just left. I backed out, didn't touch a thing. I got in the elevator and rode back down to the lobby. When the doors opened, every single light in the building went out. Complete darkness. My flashlight flicked on, just long enough for me to see a figure standing at the end of the hall. Thin, pale, hospital gown, head slightly tilted. Behind it, more shadows moved. I bolted, left my supplies, didn't clock out, just ran. I quit that night and didn't go back, didn't pick up my last check. A week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a janitor's name badge, Leo's, and a single word written on the back in black marker, replaceable. Well, that concludes today's Scary Reddit stories. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this creepy journey, don't forget to like and subscribe. Please also leave your own spooky experiences below in the comments. Who knows, I could add it to the next video, which would be amazing. Until next time,